Dear Kenyans, or should I say, fellow Kenyans, we are living in times that are very, very strange before our eyes and before our very understanding. But the beautiful thing is, while these things are strange to us, and while we feel overwhelmed by, the situation that is present with us as a nation, and of course globally, before God, who is sovereign, this is not strange. And God's sovereignty is unquestioned and unmatched in all this. And it's important that we come to that realization. And it's important that we find our strength and we find not only strength, but we also find answers from Him and through Him. Let me use an example to probably help us understand. When the children of Israel were in Egypt, they were slaves, and they went through very, very difficult times, extremely difficult times. And the thing is, these were, the people of God, and they got to the place where it was unbearable. And probably that's a place we feel as Kenyans we are at. It's almost unbearable, the burden of this global challenge, and of course, the problems that we have as our nation, which are many, and I don't want to get into that. We are, as a nation of Kenya, we are at that place where we are feeling overwhelmed by everything. And by, we are getting overcome by, the circumstances and the situations and what is happening. But in all this, my fellow Kenyans, one thing remains, unchanged, unmatched, unquestioned: the sovereign power of God. And the children of Israel realized that. And what did they do? Allow me to read from the Bible so that we see exactly what they did when they realized that the only power was the sovereign power of God that would save them. Allow me to read. Exodus 2:23 and 24, this is what it says. During that long period, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out. And their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. God heard their groaning, and He remembered His covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. They did two things. When they realized that there was no help from anyone, they groaned to the Lord, and they cried out to God. Fellow Kenyans, I want to make two very basic observations. Number one, let us stop crying out to our government and our Mr. President. While the government and the president have a role to play in making sure that we live in a country where we all thrive and we are all, our well-being, we are living in well-being, on this particular challenge, on this particular wave that is shaking nations across the globe, the sovereign power of our government and our president has been overcome. Yes, we are a sovereign nation. Yes, there is the powers that have been vested on our president and his leadership by our constitution. But I will tell you this for a fact. And we know it, but let me just say it so that it probably sinks into our hearts and into our reality. The sovereign power of our government, of our nation, of our president on this particular challenge, it has been overcome. This thing is bigger than our government. This thing is bigger than our Mr. President. And he can only do so much. The second thing I want to principally say, fellow Kenyans, our hope is in one thing. Let us turn our cry to God. Let us turn our groaning to God. Why? Simple mathematics. It is only the sovereign power of God that can overrule and overturn this wave so that we are not at that desperate place that the Israelites were. When the Israelites realized that it was only the sovereign power of God that could overrule and bring them out of that slavery from the powerful Pharaoh, they turned their cry not to a leader, not to a man, to God. And it didn't matter whether it was a young person or an old person, a good person or a bad person. So there is no excuse for you and for me as a fellow Kenyan, as just a citizen of this land. There is no excuse for not crying out to God, not to the government, not to Mr. President. That flag, let's put it down. This thing is bigger than them. The only sovereign power that will overrule anything that we see and we are experiencing is the sovereign power of God and God alone. Therefore, fellow Kenyans, our salvation, our help is in God. You as a Kenyan, young, old, it doesn't matter whether you think you're a good person or a bad person. It doesn't matter whether you feel that, oh, I go to church or I don't go to church. It doesn't matter whether you're religious or not religious. It doesn't matter whether you have ever even taken time to just, pick a Bible and read. That is not the point. As long as you're a citizen of this nation, your help on this particular one is the sovereign power of God. Cry out. A cry out is a loud cry. You imagine if 40 million of us, Kenyan citizens, just cried out every morning, God help. Help us. Help Kenya. At noonday, in the evening, in the midnight hour, all of us crying, regardless of what your religion is. Cry out. Cry out to the sovereign God. God. Groan. If you don't know how to cry out, groan. Groan in your closet, or groan in your car, groan in your business. Don't cry out to this and cry out to God. Lift your cry to God. So 40 million of us crying out, crying out, crying out, crying out. Do you not think that God will hear us? Can we not be too busy to cry out to God? Can we not be too overtaken to cry out to God, to groan to God? And the reason I bring this out is God has given this nation an opportunity to turn this wave. Kenya has been given that opportunity to turn this wave and to cause a shift of this wave. Will we take that opportunity, or will we watch it just go by?
ikutumikie, ikakufurahisha. Sisi sote tu wa Kenya, ukatufanya sote majirani. Lengo lako litimike, Muumba vyote, Kenya ikutumikie.